Oh, welcome everyone to today's Prevention Matters panel discussion. My name is Steph Vasco. I'm the Director of Communications at the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, and I'm happy to be here to introduce the session today. Prevention Matters, for those that don't know, is a monthly online panel hosted by the COH where we dive into what it means to prevent homelessness. Prevention is necessary if we want to solve the current growing homelessness crisis. This series exists to clarify what prevention means in addressing homelessness. What can we do to reduce the chances that someone will experience homelessness in the first place? What can be done to support people who are at high risk of homelessness or who have recently become homeless? And how can we ensure that people who have experienced homelessness and who are now housed do not face housing precarity again? So to dive into these questions, Prevention Matters invites brilliant minds to tell us what homelessness prevention looks like in their communities, along with the lessons they've learned along the way. So in today's panel discussion, we'll be joined by the fabulous team from Rest Centers to explore their Bridge of Hope program, a proven intervention model that combines eviction prevention, landlord engagement, rental subsidies, and culturally responsive wraparound supports to create sustained housing stability for Black youth in the Toronto and Peel regions. We'll be discussing the structural and systemic factors that lead to the disproportionate number of Black youth experiencing homelessness, how the Bridge of Hope model was intentionally designed to address this reality, how the program works in practice, and how your community can implement this model. We'll also be discussing what is needed at the systems and the policy level to better prevent and end homelessness for Black youth. Before we get into it, though, I wanted to highlight that your participation is a key part of this experience. So I strongly encourage you to engage amongst yourselves in the chat and ask any and all questions you may have during the audience Q&A towards the end of the panel. Today's panel is a chance to deepen our understanding of what it takes to prevent and end Black youth homelessness, learn from real-world implementation, and think critically about how this model can be adapted and scaled in different contexts. So please share your reflections in the chat if something a panelist says resonates with you. And as always, we invite you to keep the conversation kind, thoughtful, and engaged. And I want to highlight that your feedback is very important to us. So if you have any thoughts on how we can improve your experience, we'd really appreciate you sharing them with us. Please take a moment to make use of our feedback form in the chat because we want to hear from you. But before we get into the actual session, I wanted to provide our land acknowledgement. At the COH, we feel it's very important to pay respects to the traditional guardians of the land, which many of us are calling in from today. The COH recognizes the long-standing and ongoing relationship that Indigenous peoples have with Turtle Island, which includes both ceded and traditional land, and also includes the land known as Canada. In addition to our land acknowledgement, though, I wanted to take a moment to encourage you to learn something new about the history of the land where you reside today. Lindsay will be sharing a resource in the chat where you can look up a particular city, county, or even an entire province and learn about the territories, languages, and treaties of that land. And if you're watching this session back as a recording on YouTube, this resource will be linked in the description or somewhere on the webpage. So I still invite you to check it out and learn something new. So the COH is based at York University in Toronto, so I'll be sharing their land acknowledgement. But as always, I invite you to consider your position regarding the land in which you find yourself. So we acknowledge our presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to today's host, Steve, for introductions.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm Stephen Gates. I'm a professor at York University, Toronto. And I also lead the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness and co-lead Making the Shift Social Innovation Lab, Youth Homelessness Social Innovation Lab with Melanie Redmond. I'm going to hand it over to Dagmar to introduce yourself, and then we'll go through the panel.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's such a great pleasure to be here. My name is Dagmar Koyi, and I have the awesome opportunity to lead and actually founded the Rest Center organization. We are out in Peel, and we get the opportunity to stand alongside of hundreds of young people coming for our doors annually who are in need of housing stability. And I would like to pass it over to Lara.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lara Adetukasi. I'm the Director of Programs and Services at Rest Centers. And what that means is that I oversee our housing initiatives as well as all the programs that we do for the youths that we serve. And I'll pass it over to Kajina.
Hi everyone, my name is Kirgina. I am actually a client at Rest Centers. I'm also part of the Youth Council at Rest Centers. Thank you so much for having me today.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists and thank you to everybody who's shown up today. I was really looking forward to this, or am really looking forward to this, because I've been so impressed by the work of the Rest Center. You know, we've been working for years to try to put forward that it's better to prevent a young person's homelessness than let them kind of twist in the wind in a shelter. Not that shelters are bad or we shouldn't have them, but we really are doing our best work if we're helping young people not be homeless. And so the Rest Center is a great example of how to think differently and do things differently. If we really want to shift to prevention, that's what we need. We need to do things differently. And all the components within the Rest Center organization and within this specific program really kind of show the way of like how we should be thinking about it. So the Bridge of Hope, I'm just going to briefly describe it, and then we'll have the experts who can talk more about it. It's a program, it's prevention focused, it's equity centered, evidence based, and culturally grounded housing intervention. It supports, BIPOC youth and is an example, as I say, of how to really take seriously what a housing-led program is, what prevention means, and what are the wraparound supports that are needed to make this happen. It's not enough to just provide housing. We really need to, like, starting with where young people are, individuals, figure out what people want and need to help them move forward in their lives. So in terms of the issue, I think we should start with and understand the issue around Black and other racialized youth and homelessness and the landscape of services for young people. So, Dagmar, what does the data tell us about the reality of Black youth homelessness in Canada, and what structural forces are at play in complicating the lives of people at such high rates?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that this is a very important question to really ground this conversation. Looking at homelessness across Canada nationally, we see a growing concern. Black population is about 4 to 5% of Canada, and in homelessness across Canada, we're seeing 8% of the Black community experiencing homelessness. That's almost double in size. While we have this context, I want to identify and I want to acknowledge that where youth homelessness is concerned, there seems to be an inconsistency in the collection of disaggregated race-based data. And I think that this is a big problem because what is actually not measured is not held accountable for. It's not really resourced. So that gap does currently exist. And where there has been measurements, so for example, in Toronto, we know that in 2024, the point in time count showed that 58% of the people experiencing homelessness in Toronto are Black individuals, whereas the Black population in Toronto makes up 10%. There is overrepresentation, for example, in Peel. When it comes to youth, more specifically, in our conversations with service providers, like in Toronto, one service provider indicated 82% of the shelter are Black youth. Another shelter in Toronto said 58% are Black youth. In Peel, we know in the shelter system, over 50% of the youth access in the shelter system are Black youth. When we spoke to a service provider in Ottawa, it's 60%. And so these numbers indicate that clearly what we're seeing is really not a young person issue, but it's not coincidental, it's structural. And I think some of those structural drivers start very early. We know that Black youth are overrepresented in the child welfare system, that Black communities have over surveillance when it comes to the child welfare system, and there are more Black individuals placed in the child welfare system. And the data also shows us that when people age out of foster care, they are more likely than their peers to experience homelessness. That's 40 to 50% of youth experiencing homelessness having had some sort of interaction with the child welfare system. So that is clearly a system that is also driving or creating that type of problem. Other than that, we have structural drivers such as income insecurity. We have the escalated housing crisis that just currently exists within Canada, and young people, really, especially Black youth, they are really disproportionately affected by those drivers, because in Rest Center, we're seeing like about 80% of the youth coming through our doors earning less than $10,000 a year. And we are in Peel region, to rent one room in a shared space is about $1,200 at market rent. So with $10,000 a year already, their hourly income becomes a big barrier. And I think CMHC printed out a report that also shows us that the discrimination is also one of the leading factors, that the Black community are facing discrimination when it comes to the rental market. They are more likely to experience eviction. So all these structural drivers are really what we're seeing that is causing the numbers that is at an alarming rate in the Black community and Black youth who are experiencing homelessness. And because of those structural drivers, I think that solutions also should be structural. So this is the reason why we designed the Bridge of Hope program.
Thank you so much. That's great. And it is amazing, the data. I appreciate your point. Like, if we don't have infrastructure, then we're not collecting data. And if we're not collecting data, it renders things invisible. Kajina, what are your thoughts on the issue of the reality of homelessness amongst Black youth in Canada?
I definitely feel like there's a lot of factors that are seen as a lack of effort on youth's part when it comes to these situations. And it's always very baffling to me because, as a person at any age, having to, take your entire livelihood and everything that you're familiar with and, move that somewhere else, that's a big event in itself for a lot of people. It's a traumatizing event. And when you're put in a position where constantly a door is being closed in your face every time you try to step into what's supposed to be a safe environment or a home, there's that constant moving, which then adds another layer to it. And I find, especially, being a part of the Black community, it's a lot more no's than even maybes, or people that actually make the effort to understand where we're coming from and the barriers that we're facing. And it's just so increasingly hard to be a young person. And a lot of us have gotten kicked out due to, like, maybe authority issues. And as a landlord, that is the authority that we have to report to. And a lot of the times the disconnect starts there. And without somebody kind of acting as that advocate and middleman, it just gets so much harder to get what should be a basic human right for yourself, especially as a young person.
Thank you so much. That's very insightful, linking together structural factors, discrimination, but also the experience of being young. And most young people have a long time to kind of grow into adulthood and test things out. But if you're young and homeless, you all of a sudden everyone expects you have to behave in certain ways, and it's that compounds the situation. So thank you for that. Dagmar, can you speak more to the Bridge of Hope model and how it's tailored to meet the needs of Black youth?
Yes, I can. So the Bridge of Hope is really a culturally grounded, housing focus. It really focuses on housing stabilization, and it's also prevention oriented, and focus on really the stability of young people. And it has really three important pillars. And the first pillar for us is housing security. We really work from a housing first perspective. Young people coming through our door, we understand that we need to get them housed before anything else. And so we do that through a head-listen model. We rent units from landlords in the community and we sublet to the young people coming through our door. What that automatically does, it removes some of the barriers that are in place for young people who need housing. And some of those barriers are clear. They do not have sometimes employment letters. They do not have previous landlord and tenant experience to demonstrate to landlords who need it. Sometimes it's about the credit check, the credit history that the landlord have. So all these layers of barriers are removed because landlord begin to trust rest as the housing landlord, the partner, and not the young person. And it immediately removes the youth out of that risk as well. The other thing too with part of housing insecurity is the landlord engagement. So landlords know that there is somebody at rest that they could connect to if there is any problem that exists. In that housing security piece, the rental subsidies that we provide is also very critical, and it's very important because most of the young people coming through our door, given the housing crisis that exists, then income becomes an automatic barrier. And so placing them with also that support around rent helps them to have the stability that they need. The second important pillar for this program is the wraparound stabilization supports that we provide. So every young person coming through our doors, they are assigned with a caseworker. Caseworker make individualized care plans with them. They do goal setting. And then we layer the supports that are necessary to help them to build the skills to sustain their independent living. And so those skills look like things like financial literacy. They do tenant literacy, pathways to employment. We have mental health supports. We help with family mediation, family counseling. And then there's also basic needs, for example, like furnishing an apartment, food insecurities handles with, grocery gift cards. So these wraparound supports are presented as the second pillar of this program. And then the last pillar is the cultural safety. I think that part is very important. Young people get to work with individuals who understand their lived experiences, people that they could relate to, and some of the barriers that they face, like discrimination. They have the ability to talk to it with individuals who have also faced those same type of systematic barriers. And so that brings about that safety. They get to have mentors that they can relate to. And what that actually does, it creates a sense of belonging for the youth, because housing without belonging, it means there's still instability. Housing should include a form of belonging. And so I think that the program in itself provides that belonging because of the cultural safety. So it's designed for Black youth in specific.
I think it's just amazing. So you've got the housing, you've got the income, but it's the wraparound supports are very comprehensive and really address the different aspects that can be challenging for a young person. The family mediation, family natural supports work, the mental health supports. All of these things are really good because we can't just, as I often say, it's not enough to house someone, throw the keys through the mail slot and leave.
That's right.
You got to work with people. They're young, they're developing, they've got all kinds of promising assets and things, and how do we put it all together?
Exactly, especially with young people, like that's very important. Like you can just put them in a house and think that, okay, they have a place and it ends. The supports are so critically important. Just like Kajina said, like, they're young and many of them do not have the skills that they need to, leave or to sustain the independent living. So even within the program, they get to learn things like utility management. Like
Yeah.
at my age, I still need somebody to guide me sometimes, and they learn these things through the structured intervention that is provided in the program.
I was going to ask for a little advice on that myself. Lara, given this program model, what are the outcomes are you seeing that are showing how it works and its effectiveness?
Okay, thank you so much for your question, Steve. And I'm going to answer it based on informed from our internal performance tracking as well as an independent evaluation that was conducted by Hub's solution. So what we are seeing, I'll talk about it in three different buckets. First of all is the house instability, also eviction prevention, as well as the readiness
Right.
for independence. In terms of housing stability, it has been one of the key things that we have seen is that a lot of our youths have housing stability. For instance, we have seen a 237% increase in active clients from 2022 to 2024, just showing that they have sustained housing stability. And also when the Hub Solution did the evaluation on the program, one of the key things, from the youth was that they had increased confidence in their ability to be able to maintain a safe and stable housing, as well as when we do our calls to check on our youth to see how many remained housed. We always have from year to year, we have between 90% to 95% of people remaining stably housed after 6 months and after 12 months. The other thing I'll also talk about is our eviction prevention, because one of the
Mhm.
key success factor is our landlord engagement framework. Um, REST uses a triangular model between the landlord, where it is between the landlord, REST, and the clients. The clients come to REST when there is an issue. The landlords come to REST centers when there is an issue. And what that does is that at least 9 out of 10 of the issues that arise are solved immediately. And that contributes to eviction prevention when it comes to the landlord. Like from the survey the evaluation that was done, we had a landlord talking about the fact that REST will go to any length to ensure that the youth remains ours. Also, just last year, we onboarded 16 landlords and we had 100% retention. And when we also did our 2024 client satisfaction, we had a 96% youth housing satisfaction rate from the youth. The last thing that I'll talk about is the independent living capacity. Like Dagmar had mentioned, the wraparound service is one of the core pillars at rest centers. So we don't just leave the youths. We have different programs that we do that helps them to move towards independent living. And what we have seen is that just last year we had about approximately 150 clients complete various programs at rest, just moving them towards independent living. So yeah, that's what we're saying.
That's great. That's very impressive. There's lots of good news there. One of the things on this panel that's great is to have a good experience expert who can speak to her real world experiences. And so, Kajina, what brought you to the Bridge of Hope program, and how has it worked for you? Like, how has it impacted on your life?
I joined the Bridge of Hope program during a point in my life where I really couldn't find my footing, and it was very hard to understand what good support was supposed to be.
Mhm.
I always grew up in a situation where it was frowned upon to receive what we deemed to be handouts, but it gets to a certain point where you do come to the reality that no man is an island. And especially as a young person, the one of the greatest things that you can do for yourself is, get supports from the right people and put yourself in those situations. So I joined in 2022. I believe I was still 19 at the time. And it's just completely transformed who I am as a person. Like the version of me that stepped into rest centers for the first time would be in awe that I'm even sitting here speaking with you guys today, and with the confidence that I have now to do so. So it's not just about like finding a house. I've lived in a house for throughout many periods of my life, but it wasn't until rest centers that I really started to look into what home is supposed to mean. So knowing that there's somebody to teach me like how I'm supposed to conduct myself in a space that I get to claim as my own. And it is the wraparound supports. Like this is the first time in my life that I've actually bothered to decorate my space because I know that I can hold on to it. I can call it mine finally. So it's just so much more than placing somebody somewhere. It's positioning them to like just be on the right path and take those steps forward to independence. So through the housing support, tenant education, and financial literacy, it's helped me kind of do a lot of the things that nobody was there to teach me. And now I'm at the point that I'm a part of the youth council. I get to help out my peers. I've gotten to hear from them that, they've finally been able to kind of relax and finally take that deep exhale, knowing that they're in good hands and knowing that if times do get hard, for whatever reasons, as life happens to us all, that they have a team of people that are willing, ready, and able to go above and beyond to make sure that they're where they need to be, getting the support that they need.
Thank you so much. I think the way you described the difference between house and home was really powerful. I never thought about it like for the first time in your life, choosing what your place is like and decorating it. That's very powerful and points to the fact that in doing this kind of work, we need to focus on well-being, right? If we're and not just housing stabilization. If we focus on well-being, I think the stabilization will almost take care of itself. So that's really wonderful to hear. So, Dagma, beyond outcomes, why do you think this program is so effective? What are the key ingredients here in preventing homelessness amongst BIPOC youth?
Thank you so much, Steve. Like every time I hear Kajina speak, so I'm always just in awe, right? I'm always just in awe. And she always bring tears to my eyes, because I remember when she came to us in 2022 and just seeing the amazing leader that she is right now and the fact that she could speak, it just gives me just such great joy, and it makes this work, although it's challenging, meaningful. So thank you, Kajina, for your voice. So I want to say that one of I'll go for 4 core success factors for the Bridge of Hope program. The first and the very central is that it's youth-centered in design. We take time to listen to our young people. So the program in itself has gone through several evolution, and that it's because we're always listening. We didn't listen in the beginning and design and stop listening. We listen every single year. We bring
Right.
together our young people for consultation. Now that we have the youth council get to lead some of that consultation. We want to hear from them what's working, what's not working, what's what do we need to be? So youth-centeredness and listening to the young people. And again, they're closer to the problem. I think it's so important to understand that this program is designed to support them. And they understand the problem even better than myself. They understand the problem better than those of us designing the solution. So we need to listen to them. And so that has been a key to the Bridge of Hope program. And every year when we listen to the youth, we go back and we implement. So for example, when we first started, we did not have a recreational wellness program, but one year after another year, it came out of 2 different consultations. We want some recreational wellness, and REST took action to ensure that we are able to provide that support and service to the young people. They mentioned that, look, we do not want landlords to treat us like we're their children, and we listened, right? And so taking that feedback and going back and adapting the program to meet the needs of the youth have been one of the key success factors. A second critical success factor is the landlord engagement strategy. That's very important. We are removing the youth outside of the risk of losing their property by building these relationships intentionally with the landlord. So when we place a youth in a landlord house, the landlord is not left alone. The landlord comes to rest. So any issues that may arrive, they come to rest. property management, they come to rest, and they understand that based on the structure of the program that they do not address our clients, they address us, and we have one central individual that the landlords will engage with, and that's the landlord engagement coordinator. They have the phone call and they have the ability to call. And these relationships, it's not only built when there is a crisis, but we are very intentional in building those relationships. So the landlords therefore become a partner with us and a co-collaborator in ensuring that these youth are housed. And so we do quarterly landlord engagement training. We bring our landlords together over a meal. We discuss the program. We bring success stories so that they could feel that they're part of a community. And that also gives us the ability also to engage with other landlords who may be interested. So we have referrals where landlord refer other landlords to us, and that continues to grow our stock. So landlord engagement strategy in mitigating the risk is a key success factor. Another thing is the subsidy. Again, I mentioned the gross income gap for young people coming through the doors. And let's just put this on a number. We are looking at youth between the ages of 16 to 24. Some of the youth coming through rest doors are young people still in high school. They have not yet done their grade 12. Some of them are just entering college. And when we look at the unaffordability crisis, obviously it's affecting them. Like they cannot pay $1,200. I mean, I cringe at that. I don't know about those listening to me, but I remember when I was their age, I came to Canada and I lived in Montreal, and I experienced housing insecurity too, because when my housing was, I was at risk of homelessness and I first went to Montreal, my first apartment in Montreal was $500. And $500 and not having family support, I was scared. I was like, what if I cannot pay $500? So today, when I hear that the youth coming through our doors have to think about $1,200 just for a room, not even an apartment, like I cringe. And that alone places a lot of mental pressure and stress on any young person that has to still navigate education, that still have to think about their career. So it disrupts the entire life cycle at such a critical age. So therefore, subsidies and providing these type of financial or practical support, what it does is really undergirds the young people and give them a cushion so that they could focus on other things like, completing their education, like thinking about a career path. It immediately removes the stresses that any young person who is facing housing insecurity will face at that moment because they cannot afford. And that also bridges the gap and also enables us to continue to place youth by filling that income, that gap in regards to affordability. And this also helps to prevent homelessness. A lot of young people, when they come through the door, again, because of no education, sometimes they have not completed grade 12 or their college degree, they do not have stable employment. Employment can be sometimes short-lived, 3 months, 4 months, summer jobs. And so having that support, it also helps them to stabilize. And then the last thing I will say that's very important or key success factor is the wraparound support infrastructure. That is so important. Kajina said it. Youth need to be, they need the skills in order to be able to continue to live independently. We have young people coming to us that are aging out of foster care. Well, nobody told me about what are my responsibilities as a tenant. So the tenant education that we have design curriculum is important to teach you their tenant rights so that they would be able to negotiate for themselves and advocate for themselves, as well as their tenant responsibility. What are your responsibilities? So under tenant responsibility, we look at things like utility management. We do financial literacy. They learn what it is to cook a decent meal on a budget. Some of these things that they have never been taught. Now you have to make financial decisions, whether you're going to pay your rent or you're going to go to the movies. Let's look at it like in a very structured design program. And we do it so practical. So for example, in financial literacy, we go out shopping with them. Let's go to the grocery store. Let's look at how do we save. Let's look at how do we create a shopping list. You have $50. This is your grocery card. Like what can you buy with the $50 so that you could still have a decent meal? So we make it very practical so that the youth will be able to assimilate the information and see the transformation and build those skills for independent living. So the wraparound supports is important. I also want to say in regards to rest design, we bring the supports around the youth. So when young people are coming into rest who are at risk of homelessness, or some of them, they have gone through, some of them, so many systems. And for some of them, the systems have harm them, because there is an overexposure. We saw that Black youth are overrepresented in the homeless system. So there are overexposure in systems that are really not even designed to really support them, destabilizing systems, right? They are under-supported by systems that are meant to protect them. Now these systems are harming them. So with all of that, they're coming in. There is mental health concern and so many things. And when we have to work with youth, an important element for working with youth is trust building. When they're coming in and having been filled by so many systems, some of them are coming in with thinking, well, I just give me the subsidy dollars. Like, you're just another provider. What makes you different, right? And so building that trust is important, that relationship trust. And so that's the reason why we have the case management that is so important, that they have somebody that is working with them very closely, intensive case management. And also that we are so mental health supports they could receive through Rest Center. There is pathways to employment. We partner with other organizations, but in our partnering, what we do many times, we bring those organizations to our centers to provide that support, so the youth can continue to receive support in the place where they feel comfortable, instead of us saying, okay, you go over here today, you go over here, you go over here, you go over here. And so case management is also very important to helping them to navigate and advocate for them also for other systems to ensure that they're getting the support that they need. So the wraparound infrastructure is another key important success factor to this program.
Wow, that's fantastic. The way you describe landlord engagement, it's like really an interesting approach, where you're taking away the risk for the landlord, right? And so,
Yes.
so if I was a landlord, I'd be like, wow, this is a good thing. Can I sign up? How did you get to that place? What's the evolution, and what do you think going forward
Yeah.
in terms of landlord engagement and just the housing side of things, given the
So thank you so much. So we started the Bridge of Hope program using a co-host model. So we rented rooms in the homes of families, and we placed youth. Now we're still doing both. So I'd say it's a hybrid approach. As we paired youth with families that have a space to rent, we had, based on our youth consultation, some youth were indicating, like, I would rather independent living than living in the home of a landlord. So that's one. But then the second thing that happened as we continued to do this one well, we had more landlords say, well, you know what? I have a house. Why don't you guys rent the house? Like, I'm open to working with you and renting the house. And as the need for housing continued to increase and we had more youth coming through our doors, we did some research to first understand what is the risk of us doing head listing. We did all the research. We got a lawyer, we got a team, and then we built a head listing model framework. And then we implemented and we began to rent houses from landlords in the community. And we placed, we placed 5 youth in one house, and that also requires support. The youth leave completely independently, but we have our housing workers who visit. We work with the social workers to ensure that there is teamwork going on. They understand the chores, who does this, who does that. So there's all of that layered in it. And the young people get to have their own independent spaces. So we're finding that this is something that's also very successful. Youth really love that independent living and living, in a community with others, with their peers. It does not come without some, risk involved, because you're right, we take on the responsibility of property management. And yes, landlords, again, they know that I come to Rest Center, and that eliminates the risk that that may be applied to the young person. So we take on that risk and that responsibility to the landlords. Right now, Rest have also been able to acquire its own property for the first time. And so with that, it gives us the ability to now provide the rent at even yet a more affordable rate. So when we're renting from landlords, like, landlords are not giving us discounts, we're renting at market rate. But because we were able to access funding from the Reaching Home funding, and we were able to purchase a property, we are now able to provide the rent even at a yet a more affordable rate. And so it's our goal, as we continue to build and continue to grow, that we would be able to acquire capital funding to purchase more housing, so that we would be able to place more youth. And I also want to say that I think that the scattered housing approach also seems to be something that the young people like. I know that there are different types of models to housing, like, maybe shelters, the warehouse model. But with a scattered approach to housing, what we're doing is we're giving the young people a choice to be in the community where they already feel safe. So we're not taking them and saying, okay, you're in Brampton, now I need to put you in Mississauga. But with that scattered model, we have the ability to have houses in Brampton, houses in Mississauga, and you get to already be in the community where they already feel safe, where they already have ties, and we're not taking them out of these communities.
That's great, and it's really wonderful that you were able to access the capital to purchase the houses. Kajina, can you talk a bit about what it's like to be on the youth council and what it does?
Being on the youth council for me is kind of being that advocate that I got through my case manager and rest members when I first joined, just in terms of, there's somebody that's ready to advocate for you. To build off of what Dagmar was saying in terms of just like establishing that trust. Sometimes depending on the situations that a young person's exposed to, speaking to an adult right away may not be their most desired option. They want to speak to someone that they see as more on their level that can relate to them. So that's what we do
Nice.
as the youth council. Like during the youth consultation, it was really peer to peer, and I feel like we were able to get very open and honest answers because they didn't feel like they had to, I guess, in a way, maybe answer in a correct manner. They just spoke from a place of what they needed, and they expressed the things that would help better, get them to where they need to be, and how rest can better support them, the things that they love, the things that they hope to improve on, what they want to see more of. So just being there almost in that kind of like big brother, big sister role to them has been absolutely phenomenal. I know there's been people at rest that were on the youth council that I would have gone to when I first started out. So now to kind of be in their position, I understand why they were so just on the front lines and ready to show up for us, because it's such an amazing feeling to go from, starting out and receiving the help to now being a part of like the bigger community and more of the inner workings.
I can sure see how that youth-centered approach in the youth council is like really a key to the success, isn't it? That's great. Lara, can you talk a bit about how does the model work in practice on a day-to-day basis? Like maybe walk through what that's like.
Okay, so for us, we use a structured housing stability and support model, and it usually starts with a referral. So we have two ways that people can come into the Bridge of Hope program. They can either self-refer or they can be referred by an agency. Like Dagmar mentioned, we have a lot of community partners that we work with, including the CAS and the schools that refer directly to us. But because the program is also becoming very popular, like it's being known more in the community, we have a lot of young people that tell their other people about it. And so people self-refer as well. Once that is done, we have our program supervisor who very quickly within a short period of time has to review the application to see if there is an immediate housing need, because the Bridge of Hope is really like the entry point into all the programs at rest, as the wraparound programs were mostly created to support the Bridge of Hope participants. So after that, the program supervisor reviews it and gets back to the client. Once the client is assessed and seen to fall within the clients that we serve, the person is assigned to a case manager, and we have case managers that have between 30 to 35. I know that is high, but that is where we are right now because of funding caseloads. And then the case manager takes on the client and does the intake assessment. After the intake assessment, we create a care plan, and that care plan is kind of like the journey of the clients all through. The care plan contains things like the goals and objectives that are co-created. The youth and the case with the case manager guiding identifies various objectives that the client wants to meet. Of course, housing is at the top of the list, but there are also other objectives that the clients may have around employment, around mental health, that are also in that care plan. Once that happens, the case manager refers to the housing workers. We have the housing stability workers, like Dagmar mentioned, who also help with housing placements, and we also have the landlord engagement officer. And then once that happens, they refer that, and the landlord engagement officer is able to either look at the list of houses that we already have or look for a house depending on the needs of the clients. And then we place the clients in the house. Either provide rent subsidy depending on the financial assessment of the client, and grocery subsidy, and then other wraparound services. In the first 6 months, we have more frequent visits with the clients to go through how they're doing, go through their care plan, see how they're working towards their goal, with the intent of stabilizing them, and also ensure that they attend key programs that are key to preventing eviction, like we have the mandatory tenant education is actually mandatory because we want the clients to know their rights as well as their responsibilities. So it's very important that they attend those programs. Financial literacy is also mandatory because we want them to be able to move to financial independence. And then we have other drop-in programs that they may attend depending on their interest as well as their need that they are seeing. We know that we say we provide transitional support, but we do not have like a timeline with which clients stay with us. Like we are not a strict, you stay with us for just a year. You stay with us as long as you fall between the ages of 16 and 24, and as long as you have not met the goals of your program. So what we see is that clients either graduate if they've met all the objectives of their program, or they age out at the end of the program. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I think that's so impressive, and was so glad to hear you say there are no time limits, because I think that changes everything. If you're going into a program and you're told you have 12 months, that puts a huge amount of pressure on a young person to get things organized and changes decisions. Because if it was me and I was told I have 12 months, I wouldn't be thinking about going to school or anything like that. It wouldn't make sense, right? So I think that it's also like kind of follows the model of what you would expect, any family should be doing, right? Is like young people should leave when they're ready, and so I think that's fantastic. I love what you're saying about case management. That seems to be really key. And so with your case managers, is there any special training, or like how do you get them to that point where they're able to do this work really well?
Okay, I think our case managers, I think it actually starts from recruitment, because when Dagmar was talking about the things that make the program successful, I
Right,
think one of the key things is also the staff that we have. I think that when we employ staff, we're very intentional. Number one, we want to employ staff that have lived experience as well as reflect the clients that we serve. So that's the first thing. The
right,
other thing is that we also do quite a number of trainings. We're always training our case, we're always training our staff depending on the gaps that we identify from time to time. But there are key trainings that we do yearly and that we make sure that all our staff have, and that includes trauma informed care, because a lot of the
right.
clients that walk through our doors have gone through one trauma or the other. We also want to ensure that they understand how to provide cultural appropriate care, and then we do a lot of training around boundaries and things like that, and provide supports to them from time to time. Apart from that, I think one key thing that we have also done over the years is that we have grown, and so now apart from the case managers, we have also provided supervisors that supervise them, and then we also have external support as well from time to time that also provides training for them.
Great. And how important is the supports around family engagement and mediation and building those natural supports?
Okay, so for our family, so one of the key things that we discovered while implementing the Bridge of Hope program was that we realized that one of the key drivers of youth homelessness was family breakdown. And we created the FEM program, which is like an upstream program. It has two key things that we intend to, it has two key objectives within the work that we do at Rest. The first one is that we want to see if there are youths that we work with that want to reunite with their family, because you know that a lot of the youths that come through our doors are coming from CAS. So some of them want
Mhm.
to reunite back with their family, and we act like the mediators. So we have social workers that work with the youths. Should the youths be ready, then we connect. We have another social worker that works with the family, and then have a case conference and where we begin to look at modalities of bringing them together. But of course, I know that that is not a linear, like it's not a linear, straightforward, work. And so we have the circle of supports plan. The circle of support plan just means that we help the youths that we work with, or the youths that are referred to the FEM program, to identify an adult, like a supportive adult in their life, or various supportive adults in various aspects of their life. Because for some youths, like reuniting with their family is not an option, but they still need supportive adults apart from rest staff within their life. And we help them using the circle of care plan to identify those adults. The other thing that we use the FEM program for is that it's our upstream program. So we work with schools. Currently, we're working with the Peel District Board, with various schools within the Peel District Boards, to work with youths, between youths in high school, to just identify youths that are at risk of family breakdown and show them the supports that are available at rest that they can access.
Often when we talk about young people and what the goal is as they move to adulthood, we talk about independence. And I actually think, when you were talking about family or natural supports, like meaningful adults in their life, everybody is interdependent.
Mm.
And having those kind of supports helps you, right? Rather than just like being independent shouldn't mean being by yourself.
Yeah.
So that's excellent. Dagma, if organization, so first of all, like I love learning more about the work you do all the time. There's a complexity there to what you do, which it doesn't mean that it's confusing or it's so complex can't grasp it, but there's a lot going on that's been very thoughtfully developed and implemented over time to get you to where you are now with this great way of doing this work and creating such great outcomes. So Dagma, if organizations or communities are interested in kind of going down this road with this model, what is the implementation pathway? Like, what advice would you give an organization?
Thank you so much, Steve. So yes, so over the years of implementing this, there's so much that we have learned and so much knowledge that we have gathered. And I think one of the things that in just implementing the program and the way that it's designed, it is something that can actually be replicated across communities. But I will say that it's not a plug and play issue. So we have partnered with Homeless Learning Hub, and we have some tools that are being designed currently, like a program model learning guide that will be available as of March the 1st. So you could download the program guide to go through it and see if this is something that you or your community is interested in implementing. Apart from that, there will be a self-paced baseline training that will also be available for the Homeless Learning Hub that you will have access to, that you would be able to go through on your own time to learn a little bit more about the program and its implementation. And for those that are really seriously interested in seeing how they could actually implement this model in their community, REST will also be hosting in-person training and some capacity training workshops in the summer. So there is a link that will be placed in the chat as well, that if you are interested, you could definitely give us your details and we could send you more information about this upcoming training. But this training will be structured so that you would be able to have toolkits, access to job descriptions, housing readiness tools. We'll go over funding structure that will guide the implementation of the model. So it's a more thorough, in-depth training that we will be providing for those who are interested. And again, the link for that is also in the chat that you could sign up, and we'll be happy to share with you when those resources become available and when the training will be taking place.
Well, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Everyone on this call, stay tuned for these resources, and you'll be learning from this very experienced and innovative team. Download all the materials and send them to all your colleagues. Spread the word. Lara, you want to add anything about implementation?
No, I think I said everything I wanted to say.
Oh, okay, so I'm going to end with a question for all of you.
Okay.
And then we're going to go to the questions from the floor. So Dagmar, earlier on, you talked about the importance of understanding the systems that create the problems that we're talking about. What needs to change at the systems and policy level, right? Because we've got like a great approach here. Why isn't it in every community? But what would you say? We've talked about child protection, we've talked about employment, lots of different things.
Yeah.
So, Kajina, let's start with you. What do you think needs to happen? Or what would you like to see?
What I would like to see ideally is just less reactive approaches to things. And as Dagmar has said numerous times, like if it's affecting youth, youth should be the center of those systems that need to change. I feel like a lot more people and organizations would benefit from just having some form of a youth body, a youth council, just to get a better understanding of like what the actual issue is, like, you know, actually taking in the advice from people with the lived experience. We do it in a lot of other aspects in life. It would only make the most sense to hear from the people that are directly being impacted by these policies that are in place, because then it's less time rewriting it and fixing it. We can start off with a policy that works, or at least is able to be built on with less, I guess, like fall off, and without losing youth in the mix of all of that. It's already so hard getting people to listen to you as a young person, but when it's a matter of will I be housed tomorrow, you do want to know as a young person that your voice is in that conversation.
That's fantastic. So it's youth voice, youth choice, and it needs to be everywhere along the way to doing this work.
Yes.
That's really good. Lara, what about you and where do we need to be working on systems change?
I think for me, I'll talk about funding, maybe because I'm in the day to day and I see the realities of
Right.
working on short string budgets. Like it's food, I see the reality of working on short term budgets. Like housing is not a 6 month intervention, it's not a 1 year
Yeah,
intervention. So we need to move away from short term project based funding to more multi year, long term funding that allows us to do the work in a meaningful way. Like I said earlier, like the youths are not with us for a short period of time, and it's a different experience for different youths. There is no timeline to which the youths need support. They are with us as long as they need support. So I think that if the funding framework can move, from being reactive, to providing more long-term budgets, that allows us to plan and effectively also innovate and as we go, that would be really great. And then I also think that another key thing that I want to mention is also, like Dagmar mentioned, the fact that we're doing the head leasing model. Right now there are no policies that actually incentivizes the landlord, so we do a lot of work advocating, to the landlord. So if there are policies that can be put in place that brings incentives for the landlords and allows it to be easier for people to enroll in programs like this, seeing that there are other benefits that they can get apart from, giving back to their community, that would also be great. So
that's
those two
great.
for me. Yeah.
Great. And Dagmar, you'll have the last word.
Thank you. I think that it's important for everybody who's listening to understand that if we get to the youth at the point of crisis, we're late. We're
Right.
getting to them too late. And so, with that in mind, we need to focus more on prevention than we are focusing on crisis. The systems and the supports and everything in place seem to be more catered towards crisis
Yep.
mitigation than prevention. And it's very clear that crisis, when you get to crisis stage or emergency shelters or crisis responses, it's more expensive than prevention. So some data that you provided me, for example, Steve, prevention work, right? Housing First for Youth is like $55 a day, and a
Yep.
shelter is $100 a day. So we're not saying that shelters should not exist. What we're saying is that we also need to think about how are we working more upstream to prevent you from
Yes.
even getting in that place of crisis. And that will save us taxpayers more dollars when we
Yeah.
focus on prevention. And it is a known fact that prevention, stabilizing youth, can also prevent them from entering into chronic homelessness, which has more costs to the
Yeah.
system in itself. When we talk about mental health or community safety, or we talk about the, getting into prison and all of that's a significant cost. So I think one of the things that I would advocate for is an investment in prevention and preventative models that prevent you from getting into crisis. I think Lara said it well when she mentioned multi-year funding approach.
Yep.
Like, this is a life-saving work. And doing a life-saving work cannot happen on a short string budget or
No.
short-term funding or resources that are running out all the time. As an organization, for example, we're like in the second month of the year and we have over 45 young people on our waiting list waiting for support. And we still have this short string funding while we are trying to stabilize youth and we do not have stabilized funding. So it really takes intentional investment if we are interested in solving this housing crisis that we're seeing for young people. And I think even in data in Canada, it shows about 50% of the homeless people are young people and are more likely to enter chronic homelessness. So there should be a targeted investment in that, not just short-term investment. I also would like to say that race-based data, like what you do not count, you don't track,
Yeah.
there's no accountability when you're not tracking it. So there is a need that they must begin to collect race-based data across homelessness systems because data drives accountability. And what we are seeing in the Black community, it's real. It's not coincidental. It is structural. And for every one young person behind a percentage, it means that the system is failing them. It's not a youth failure, but it's a system failure. And so that needs to be tracked and people need to be held and systems need to be held accountable for that. And then my last point is really around funding Black-led initiatives and funding Black-led infrastructure, like building capacity across Black-led organizations that are doing this particular work. Don't just call us to the table, but also fund us in doing the capacity development. Like we are
Right.
on the front line of our community. We understand the needs of our community. We have lived experience that should be accounted for as expertise, right? And so consultation, begin to consult with us and let's begin to collaborate so that we would be able to build the infrastructure to continue to support our community, especially because the data is already existing that we have high overrepresentation in homelessness across Canada. So this would be my call for changes, policy recommendations. And we did we hosted a Black Youth Housing Equity
Yes.
Summit in November. And part of that, we collaborated with our youth council and some other community leaders in putting together a joint statement that are calling for some of these policy recommendations. We have over 100 organizations that have signed on that. And those who are listening, you could join us today in also signing on. I think the link will be in the chat, signing our joint statement as we continue to push forward so that this work that we have doing can continue to create impact for our communities. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And I love what you have to say about prevention. Like if we can prevent a young person from becoming homeless in the first place, not only will there be better outcomes for that young person, there will be for their family and their community. And so we have to get around the idea that doing prevention is like expensive or we can't do it. It's like if we do preventive work, not only are we doing the right thing, but it saves money, which should then be reinvested in more of this. So thank you, all of you, for your wonderful insights. Now we'll hand it over to Lindsay or Steph to come forward if people have any questions.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you all. I mean, I took away so many things from this discussion, but I think the biggest takeaway is every community needs the Bridge of Hope program and rest centers. I think you're going to be getting tons of phone calls after this, Dogma and team. This is just incredible work. We will get to the Q&A now. I see one question's popped up in there, but If anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop them in there. And if you're having trouble finding the Q&A, it's at the bottom of your screen, or use the chat if you get lost, and we'll get to them one by one. All right, so the first question here from Karen, she's wondering, is it mandatory young people attend the workshop first before acceptance? So the landlord and tenant workshops, the budgeting workshops. And then a second part to that is, can youth be accepted if they don't have a day plan and state they don't want to go to work or school?
Don't know who want to answer that question, but I could hop on and then Lara can. No, they do not have to take those capacity building training prior to housing. Housing is the first thing that we address when you've come in the door. What we have found that is the gap from us being able to immediately place you is usually income. Many times we have to try to connect with whether it's OW, Ontario Works, we're trying
Right.
to get some, because the subsidies we provide is just part of the rent. We do not cover 100% of the rent. So that's usually the barrier when they come through the door and the gap that we find. Because we usually, I think based on our success, within 60 days, we place a youth. And some of them, we have the ability, they come in and maybe they have OW or they have those income supports in place. We are able to place them more immediately than others, but we do not put the training as a precursor to housing. They get their case manager and then they are actually put into programs and training. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if Lara wants to jump in.
I think you've said it all, Dagmar. We're very low barrier, like very low barrier. So, and it's housing first, really, because we find out that once you're able to place the youth, that solves like several of the problems. Just having a place to call home, helps you to settle down before you begin to think of other things. So we are housing first.
And I think the person also asked about income and employment. I think there was a question around that.
Yes, there was. Yeah.
Okay, yes. So with the youth work with case managers to identify their goals. So we do financial assessments. Currently at Rest Center, most of our subsidy programs are not long-term. So we do not have a core funding that have provided us with funding as long as the youth need it. So understanding the context of the funding framework that we work in, it's our goal to ensure that these youth coming through our doors are not re-entering homelessness once they leave Rest Center. So part of the goal setting is, okay, like what goals are we going to work on to help you to make strides towards some level of financial independence? Does that mean that we need to connect you to training, employment training, pathways to employment, and all of so we do that work intentionally to ensure that the youth are building their capacity, that even when supports at Rest Center ends, that they can continue to sustain their independent living.
You're muted, Steph.
All right, there we go. Try again. Someone else in the chat has asked about employee burnout and how do you prevent that here? That's a big
I
question.
think that's the second time I'm hearing that question in 2 days.
Yeah.
And employee burnout is real. That's
It
just
is.
the honest truth, because there's the case of vicarious trauma. We're doing the work that we do is we get to engage with the youth, and it's a lot. Like we have staff that bend backwards, to get the work done, just because they're part of the community and they also want to give back. But one of the things that we said earlier, we're very big on training, so we always help our staff to identify boundaries, identify signs of burnout. We also have, apart from providing capacity building, we also do like wellness activities. Like we do wellness activities, we do lunch and learn from time to time, where we take out time to just invest in ourselves and to learn. We also go out for retreats. Like last year we had a 2-day retreat where we just, talked about things like that and just help them to identify that. Apart from that, we also provide a robust insurance as well that allows them to be able to get help. But yes, employee burnout is real, and we're constantly, Dagmar is constantly looking for more funding, for us to be able to, reduce the workload. And we're growing as an organization. I think just last year we grew I think about 100% that might increase in terms of the staff. So we're growing as an organization and putting systems in place to ensure that no one has more workload than is needed.
Yeah, so we're trying to manage caseloads, and I know to do the work well. I think the data, I think from Steve and them say to do housing first, it requires like 20, not more than 25 youth. Um, we are currently, our case managers have over 25 because again, the need is so significant. But what we're doing is we're now saying, okay, we will have to do a waiting list. We cannot continue to overburden staff, understanding that the burnout is real. And so we continue to advocate for resources so that we would be able to continue to provide the necessary supports that youth need. I think in the region of Peel, for example, since we are the only B3 organization providing this type of supports, and we have grown in visibility, we seem to have a lot more referrals. So we have, for example, Peel Children's Aid Society, we have referrals coming from the schools, referrals coming from the shelter system, and we also accept self-referrals because when the youth come to our doors, they love the services, they go back and they tell their friends. And so we're also accepting that too. So that we see the increase and the uptake in the need for these types of supports for our clients. And we are very mindful of that and that's the reason why we currently implemented the waiting list so that we could ensure that we are managing staff capacity as much as we can.
Great.
Yeah, and then funding has already come up a couple times, but someone in the chat was wondering what are some of the sources of funding for the Bridge of Hope program?
So at REST currently, we do not have any core funding. And so we have been able to receive support from the Reaching Home funding for the federal government allocation for Region of Peel. That have been a very big instrument in supporting us with providing case management services to youth, as well as the housing stability workers. That funding continues to support us, and we've seen that I think that program they've renewed us again for 2 years, so that's good. That continues to support some of our staff. In regards to rental subsidies, the Region of Peel implemented a program. I think the program is 2 years now. It's called the CAS program. And that program, it gives, subsidy dollars to organizations so that individuals can receive the support in the places where they already feel comfortable. So that allocation of funding have also given us the ability to place more young people by working in partnership with the region on that funding. Also, REST has some corporate foundations that also give us money so that we are also able to give out more subsidies, because the subsidies from region is a portion of that, and we have more youth that needs that amount of money than we have funding for. So we continually are always doing fundraising and seeking to, we ask from corporations, we ask from foundations, and that's how we've been able to do the work that we do at our center: private foundations, corporations, and some funding from government.
Incredible that you can get all of this work done without core funding. It's impressive.
It's not easy. I'll just be honest. It's not easy. I think the demand in the community is a lot. There's a lot of need. There's a lot of need from the youth. Like, I mean, when you hear somebody like Kajina coming in, and I think being so close to the community, it gives us this passion that we will not stop. We will ensure that we will move the horses if we have to ensure that the youth coming through our door gets the support that they need. But Stephanie, you're right. It makes it difficult to plan properly.
Yeah.
Like we have a model and the model is successful. Clearly, like 95% of youth are sustaining their independent housing when they come to rest center. And then the model also saves the system money because when we're taking these youth out of the shelter or we're diverting them from the shelter, that means that $100 a day is no longer being allocated towards that youth. So there is saving here. So there is need, and that's the reason why we're also building tools and we're trying to advocate to say to systems that, doing this work, it's saving money, but it also requires money that goes into the program to ensuring that we could continue to stabilize the youth that we're seeing, like the subsidy dollars. We need subsidy dollars. We cannot do that without subsidy dollars. We need more subsidy dollars. At this stage, like rest, we have the beginning of the year, all of our subsidy dollars are allocated. So we are currently in like fundraising, sending out several appeals because we have a growing waiting list and we have every single funding dollar, whether it's from the municipal government as well as the ones we have from private funders, it's currently allocated and we do not have any more to give to any youth that are coming for the door. So what that means is they're coming in the door and we cannot place them because without subsidies, there is no way we could bridge the gap that exists between the income that they have and the cost of rent. So funding, when we say funding is important to this work, it is critically important.
Absolutely. Oh, goodness. Well, there's no stopping you now. And we've got a question from Waleed in the chat here, you may have seen. He notes that 40% of Toronto community housing tenants are Black, and many youth are evicted from social housing by being removed from the lease. He'd like to know, what are your thoughts related to a moratorium on evictions from social housing?
So we do not really at this current time, like we do not have any types of collaboration. And I think that this is something that we are hoping that we could explore more as more social housing become available, like in Peel, for maybe youth and youth coming through our services. But we know that even like in Peel, there is like a growing waiting list around social housing. So that infrastructure is just currently not available. So because of that, I have not been monitoring any data specific on that around, evictions of youth from social housing. But again, I know that more broadly, like the CMAC data, there is some data that shows, I mean, I cannot speak, I don't know about this specific data that you just showed there, but I know that the data does exist that in the Black community, we are seeing more evictions and more people denied of housing again. And so I think what that highlights is that discrimination is a structural barrier. And that is the reason why the data needs to exist, because if discrimination is a barrier, then it becomes a unique challenge of Black and racialized people. And that needs to be tracked and be accountable for. And therefore, there needs to also be structured intervention. That's the reason why we have the Bridge of Hope program that includes the landlord engagement piece. That's a structured intervention to be able to mitigate some of these factors.
Great, thank you. If there are no further questions, it looks like I haven't received any other questions in the chat or in the Q&A field. We may just be at the end of our session. Oh, I'll close us out here. And before I do, I know this has come up already, but we have a ton of great resources that we're working with REST on developing. Dagmar mentioned the self-paced training, the Bridge of Hope program model guide, and some additional resources that we'll be publishing and sharing with everybody on the call. We'll also have the recording of this Zoom session ready and available and sent to you next week. So it'll all be a nice tight little package for you in your email at some point next week. So keep an eye out for that. Excited to share that with everyone. And before we go, I wanted to thank you, Dagmar, Laura, and Kirjina, for sharing all of your insights with us. This has been such a powerful session, and I can't wait to share all of the learnings. We'll have recap blog posts and content to come from this, so this is very helpful. And thank you to all for joining us today and staying engaged right until the end. We'll be announcing our next session, March's Prevention Matters session soon, so stay tuned for that. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we really appreciate your feedback, so please take a moment to fill out the form linked in the chat. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at thehub@edu.yorku.ca. And we look forward to seeing you at next month's session. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.